Way back in the first few weeks after Biden took office, Press Secretary Jen Psaki made a quick remark about so-called hate speech on social media and the new administration's support for platforms removing it.
Does President Biden support the continuing ban of President Trump on their sites?
I think that's a decision made by Twitter. We've certainly spoken to, and he's spoken to, the need for social media platforms to continue to take steps to reduce hate speech, but we don't have more for you on it than that.
And at the time, there wasn't much alarm raised about that comment. Yeah, sure, she is talking about the removal of constitutionally protected speech from a government podium, but she's just talking as an uninvolved observer. Twitter is a private company. They can do what they want, and therefore Jen Psaki either supporting or opposing their moves at a distance isn't really a First Amendment issue. It's not censorship merely if the government likes it, only if the government actually does it. That was the defense. And the problems with that argument are two. One, the First Amendment and free speech are a philosophical value, not just a legal barrier. And the philosophical reasons why the First Amendment was adopted apply just as validly to our private interactions with each other as they do to government authority over us. We as a culture believe in the marketplace of ideas. We believe that a free exchange in which ideas compete is the best mechanism to arrive at the truth, and that no one person or group of people has a monopoly over truth. And if we believe that, we should be just as skeptical of attempts to censor each other as we are of government trying to censor us through law or any other action. And two, even if we are totally comfortable with this private company standard of censorship, it's lacking some limiting principle on what private company actually means. So long as it's the private hand of the private actor that ultimately pushes that censorship button, is it always fine? What if the government's gun is pointed at his head when he does it? What if a sack of government cash is given to him when he does it? Or more realistically, in this progression, what if this private actor does the censorship right after a nice cozy meeting with his government best friends at their direction? The problem with accepting Psaki's first commentary is that it opened that door. As long as the government's bidding is done privately, then things that would be plainly unconstitutional for the government to do themselves simply get outsourced, and they get done anyway. Until this week, that was just a theoretical prediction for how this would go, but now it's a confirmed reality. And not because a journalist uncovered some nefarious plot or some secret document, but because the White House is now openly admitting, yeah, we don't care about free speech as a value. We don't care about the founding philosophy of our country's governance. When we think that your views or your speech are a threat, we work with the internet's gatekeepers to suppress them.
In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
So, exactly as predicted and described months ago, the government gives the social media company direction to censor, and the social media company does that censorship at the direction of the government. And we're supposed to pretend this is fine because it's a private actor committing the final act, as though it'd be fine for the government to direct private cruel and unusual punishment to be inflicted upon you, or for the government to direct a private investigator to search your home without a warrant. And it's crucial to understand that clip was not some isolated one-off comment. It was not some poorly thought out impromptu Psakiism in response to a reporter's question. Calling on social media companies to censor your unacceptable opinions is an intentional, organized effort. It was the entire point of this press conference. The main announcement of the day is that Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is unveiling his new report confronting health misinformation, declaring your idiot Facebook posts about coronavirus and the vaccines to be a public health crisis.
Surgeon General advisories are reserved for urgent public health threats. And while those threats have often been related to what we eat, drink, and smoke, today we live in a world where misinformation poses an imminent and insidious threat to our nation's health.
Well, if you're worried about snake oil cures, censorship is the worst of them. There is no society in the history of the world that has censored its way to health and prosperity. The strangling of freedom usually has bloody ends, not utopian ones. But yes, I'm sure this is the guy who will finally do it right. And just in case it isn't obvious, this guy has no fondness for the philosophy of free speech. He delivered one of the most backward Orwellian lines I've ever heard. He said that by censoring your viewpoint, he's actually protecting your freedom.
The truth is that misinformation takes away our freedom to make informed decisions about our health and the health of our loved ones.
As though this guy supports you making free choices about your medical care. He doesn't. The entire point of his effort is to ensure that you make one choice, which is the choice that he makes for you. But to the broader philosophy, if you don't support the individual's right to think freely and to speak freely, then you don't support any of his other rights either, because that is the right through which all others are derived and maintained. It's the first one listed for a reason. If you attack this one, you attack them all. This guy's logic would have you believe that shackles and a cage protect your freedom to be safe. And circling back on Psaki, it is clear that her commentary on flagging for Facebook was accurate and intentional. Much of the press conference is her and Murthy describing the censorship directives they're delivering to social media companies. Here is what we are telling them to do, she's saying.
We expect more from our technology companies. We're asking them to monitor misinformation more closely. We're asking them to consistently take action against misinformation super spreaders on their platforms.
There are also proposed changes that we have made to social media platforms, including Facebook. We have proposed that they create a robust enforcement strategy that bridges their properties and provides transparency about the rules. It's important to take faster action against harmful posts. As you all know, information travels quite quickly on social media platforms, and Facebook needs to move more quickly to remove harmful violative posts.
And Psaki even teetered on targeting specific individuals. She says she wants action taken against a dozen anti-vax misinformation kingpins, like they're crime lords running some smuggling operation.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation on social media platforms. All of them remain active on Facebook, despite some even being banned on other platforms, including Facebook, ones that Facebook owns.
And both placed at least some, if not most of the blame for misinformation on the social media platforms themselves.
Modern technology companies have enabled misinformation to poison our information environment. They've allowed people who intentionally spread misinformation, what we call disinformation, to have extraordinary reach. They've designed product features, such as like buttons, that reward us for sharing emotionally charged content, not accurate content.
Yeah. They're tools, dude. Hammer companies have added claws on the back end that can be used to puncture human skulls, yes, but they're tools designed to push and pull nails, and 99+% of the time, that's what they're used to do. You can make this argument about any misuse of technology, but that doesn't mean that the manufacturer is responsible or that the misuse outweighs the benefit. With speech, as with everything else, a philosophy of freedom recognizes that while bad outcomes are possible, the human prosperity that results from upholding it far outweighs any suffering that may happen. And with speech, we aren't even talking about physical suffering. We're talking about words on a screen that you don't like. But even though this is an egregious betrayal of this country's philosophy, it is to be expected, at least insofar as government gonna government. Their slow creep infringement on your rights is a practically inevitable development, as our constitutional authors foresaw and tried to protect against. So it is disappointing to see this administration's oaths to it broken, but it's even more outrageous to see the journalistic tag-along in that betrayal, because this was a press conference, after all, complete with opportunity for the press to ask challenging questions. And you might think, hey, you guys sound pretty hostile to our country's first principle. That might make a great first question, but it was not the first question. In fact, it was not any question. It was never asked. Instead, we got yet another swing at the Russian collusion dead horse. This was actually the first question asked.
Are you seeing sort of structures behind the scenes that point to who or what might be behind that? We've seen Russian disinformation in the past. We've seen kind of that sort of hybrid warfare. Are you seeing any indication that there could be nation states behind this disinformation?
As though it requires nefarious foreign terrorists for a weird opinion to get posted on Facebook. Lady, in a free country of 330 million people, you're going to find some oddballs, and that's not a bug in the system. That's a feature. Besides, the amount of control necessary to get that many people to conform completely in their viewpoints would be actual government abuse infinitely more evil than the inconsequential Russian trolling that you're so worried about. And if you are so worried about foreign government information control, maybe just a moment of skepticism about government information control here would be worthy of some thought, maybe even worthy of a question. But that question never comes because these people aren't actually in the business of challenging authority and seeking truth. They are only in the business of achieving the ends that this administration and this party want. I suspect if this same censorship effort were coming out of a different administration, of a different party, the questions asked would also be drastically different. So what are the options? Well, one, set up accounts on alt tech platforms. This writing has been on the wall for some time. Even without government direction, Zuck and company's commitment to your speech is a ship that sailed even before that Russian collusion horse was beaten dead. So take your speech to a place that actually values it. There are many of them, and they're getting better every day. The places that I've set up shop are linked below and on my website. Yeah, well, what happens when the government tries this same crap with alt tech too? Well, that's where the courts come in. And granted, given that timeline, there won't be any immediate relief, but I do think this issue is the most important constitutional question of this era. Can the government outsource plainly unconstitutional action to a private agency to enact on its behalf? Can the government simply hire a censor to do things that the government is itself prohibited from doing? And that question is clearly answered. As far as I'm concerned, the government hiring someone to do something is still the government doing that thing, just through another means. If I hire a guy to mow my lawn, or if I mow my lawn, the lawn still gets mowed at my direction. So this behavior is clearly in violation of the legal spirit of the First Amendment and the philosophical spirit too. If it's not good for the government to control viewpoints, then it's not good for them to do that directly through their own action or indirectly through the help of somebody else. I think any sane legal reading in a sane court would reach that conclusion, but betting on a sane court to do that clearly is no guarantee either. So unfortunately, I'm left without a totally optimistic option or action to take or safety net to count on, at least with anything close to certainty. Best I can do is this. Let the Facebook shitposts be the violins on the Titanic. If this thing's going to sink, I at least want the entertainment value. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.